She left me nothing. Not the house we built together, not the savings, not even the china set I'd inherited from my mother. And the worst part wasn't the will. It was that my children already knew. I found it in the back of a drawer I hadn't opened in years. One of those shallow ones where old pens go to die and expired coupons curl like dried leaves. I'd been looking for sewing needles. Instead, I pulled out a slim blue folder labeled in his unmistakable hand, "Private." There was nothing dramatic in how I opened it. No trembling hands, no intuition, just the quiet rustle of aging paper, the dull click of metal clasp. A notarized will, signed and dated 7 years before he died. Everything went to a woman named Sandra Mayfield. I blinked at the name, certain I'd misread it. Sandra? Who the hell was Sandra? Not a cousin, not a nurse, not even a colleague from the hardware store he'd managed before retiring. Then the next page. Witnesses, Julianne Walton, Marcus Hill, my daughter and son. My legs gave out before the rage did. I sank into the chair like it was a cliff edge, heart beating in some awful rhythm that didn't belong in my body. They knew. Both of them. They had stood beside him, smiled, signed, watched him disinherit me, and said nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I moved like a ghost through the kitchen, opening cupboards, closing them. I held a teacup I hadn't used in years, the one he gave me on our 25th anniversary, the one with a hairline crack near the rim. At 2:11 a.m., I texted my daughter. Me. Can we talk tomorrow? I found something of Dad's. She replied instantly. That told me everything. Julianne. Mom, please don't overreact. It's not what you think. But it was exactly what I thought. By morning, the quiet turned mean. The house felt hollow, like a shell after the creatures crawled out. 42 years of shared life, meals, laundry, hospital visits, Christmas mornings, and bedtime arguments about the thermostat, erased with 3 pages and 2 signatures. I put on my old brown coat, the one he hated, and walked to the lawyer's office I remembered from when we made our first will. It was still there. Same chipped paint on the corner rail. The receptionist smiled too wide when I gave my name. Of course. Leslie had everything filed here. You're Mrs. Clark? I was, I said. She hesitated. Do you want to see a copy? I already have one. I want to know if it's valid. The lawyer was young. Too young to have known us. He reviewed the file with a calm professionalism that made me want to scream. It's legally binding, I'm sorry. Can it be contested? He gave that lawyer polite shrug. Only if there's evidence of fraud or diminished capacity. But 7 years ago, he was of sound mind. I left with a copy in my purse and fire in my throat. That afternoon, I stood outside Julianne's house. I didn't ring the bell, just stared at the white siding I'd helped paint one summer, the lilac bush I'd planted when she got pregnant with her first. Inside, I saw her silhouette, laughing, holding a wine glass. With him, my son, Marcus. They looked whole, and I, outside my own blood, was a stranger. That night, I opened my own drawer, the one where I kept bank records. And deeds. And the letter from my husband, written just before his first surgery. Whatever happens, he'd written, we built this life together. Turns out, only one of us believed that. I didn't confront them. Not yet. You don't walk into a fire just because you smell smoke. You wait. Watch. Let the flames show you where they're strongest. The next morning, I called Marcus. Morning, Mom, he said. Too cheerful. Do you know who Sandra Mayfield is? A pause. The kind that stretches into something shameful. She was a friend of Dad's. A friend? I asked. That what we're calling it? He sighed. I knew you'd take it this way. I'm taking it exactly how it was written. She gets the house, the savings, everything. I don't even get the dog's ashes. Mom, you signed it. Another pause. I was 25. I didn't understand what it meant. No, I said. You understood. You just didn't care. He hung up before I did. That's how things worked in our family now. By noon, I was on a bus across town. The address on the will was real. A modest house in a quiet cul-de-sac. Sandra Mayfield's mailbox had a cheerful sunflower painted on it. There were wind chimes, a wreath on the door. The kind of place that says, I've settled into my happy ending. I didn't ring the bell. Not that day. Instead, I walked the neighborhood, studied the cars, the curtains, the little garden by the fence with pink begonias. Everything about it made me nauseous. That night, Julianne came over. She let herself in, like always, like she still had that right. Mom, she started, you shouldn't have gone there. You knew, I said. You stood there. You watched him do it. And you never told me. Because it would have crushed you. And it wasn't about you, not really. No? I laughed, bitter and dry. He left me with nothing, but sure, not about me. He said you'd be fine, she added. You always land on your feet. Funny thing. That's exactly what women like me hear when men like him decide we're no longer necessary. You're strong. You'll manage. As if strength is some consolation prize for being discarded. We sat at the table in silence. The clock ticked loud, like a dare. I looked at her. The daughter I raised, fed, cried over, forgave more times than I could count. And all I saw was the stranger who let this happen. Do you know what's in my name? I asked. She said nothing. I checked. The car's mine, the joint account, my pension. That's it. Still nothing. So when the house transfers to her and she decides to sell, where do you think I'll go? Mom, she finally whispered. We thought she wouldn't do that. Well, you were wrong. When she left, she didn't hug me, just picked up her coat like it was too heavy. I made myself tea that went cold on the table. Then I called a lawyer of my own, one I'd never used before, one who didn't know my husband, or our family, or the way we used to be. I want to protect what's mine, I said. You mean what's left? No, I replied. I mean what I'm about to take back. The lawyer's office smelled like dust and printer toner. Clean, quiet, efficient. A place where people rewrote what others had tried to erase. Her name was Nadine, late 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. The kind of woman who didn't blink when you said your dead husband left everything to his mistress. I've seen worse, she said. But not by much. She didn't ask how I felt about it. She asked what I wanted. I want to know my options. All of them. Especially the ones that sting. Nadine leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen on the desk. The will's valid. It's filed, witnessed, uncontested for 7 years. Contesting it now would be uphill, costly, emotional. You might not win. I don't need to win in court, I said. I just need to win in real life. She nodded. Good. Then you'll want to isolate your assets. Anything in your name stays there. Anything you control. Bank accounts, investments, insurance. You separate. Clean lines, no overlap. And the house? She frowned. Technically, when probate finishes, it becomes hers. Unless there's a caveat clause we can exploit. She flipped through the copy I'd brought. Her eyes stopped at paragraph 6. Well, she said slowly, isn't that interesting? What? If Sandra refuses the inheritance, or fails to claim it formally, It reverts to the secondary beneficiary. I raised an eyebrow. Which is? You. I stared at the paper, my name in faded ink like an afterthought. So if she walks away, I said, it comes back to me. Nadine smiled. Exactly. I left her office with a folder of documents and a plan. I wasn't going to beg Sandra, but I was going to talk to her. Face to face, not like a wife, like a woman who's done being erased. The next morning, I drove to the address again, parked farther away this time. My hands didn't shake when I rang the bell. The woman who opened the door was older than I expected, late 60s. Slim, graceful, dressed like someone who never forgets earrings. Her eyes widened when she saw me. You must be Martha. I nodded. I suppose you know why I'm here. She opened the door wider. Would you like some coffee? I stepped inside. The living room was neat, tasteful. No family photos, no trace of him. Just books, candles, soft music playing in the background. I didn't know he'd left it all to me, she said calmly, pouring coffee. Not until the lawyer called. You were close? She hesitated. For a time. Yes, but not in the way you think. I waited. He told me you'd left him emotionally, that he was lonely, that you were cold. I laughed, short and harsh. So he played both of us. Sandra looked down. Apparently. We drank in silence. I'm not here to accuse you, I said finally. I'm here to ask you to walk away. And if I don't, I'll fight it. Drag it out. Publicly. Quietly. Every way I can. Sandra's eyes didn't waver. And if I do? You do the right thing, I said, and the house reverts to me. You walk away with your dignity intact. She stood, walked to the window. The light framed her face like a portrait. For a long time she said nothing. Then softly, almost absently, he always said you'd outlast us both. She turned to me. I'll sign the refusal. No apologies, no explanations. Just a woman closing a chapter she never asked to write. I left with her promise and something close to respect. That night, I slept. For the first time in weeks, I slept like I had nothing left to prove. The next morning, I made oatmeal. Not the instant kind. The kind that sits on the stove and simmers slow with milk and a pinch of salt. How he used to like it. I stood by the window while it bubbled, watching the same squirrel make the same leap between the same two trees. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was tired. But under that tiredness was something sharper. After breakfast, I called Julianne. Mom? She answered cautiously. I spoke to Sandra. A beat. And? She's signing the refusal. The house comes back to me. Silence. You should be relieved, I added. Means you don't have to fake concern anymore. That's not fair, she muttered. No, I said. Fair would have been you telling me the truth. Once. At any point in the last 7 years. She was just lonely, Mom. She didn't have anyone else. We didn't think she'd actually claim anything. And if she had, I asked, where would I be then? I heard her take a breath, ready to answer, then stop. Never mind, I said. I don't want excuses. I want you and Marcus here tomorrow. Noon. Why? You'll find out. I hung up before she could argue. Then I went to the bank. Nadine had given me a list of things to do, accounts to freeze, titles to move, passwords to change. I sat in that stiff leather chair, signing forms while a young man in glasses explained everything in a voice 2 tones too bright. Mrs. Clark, are you sure you want to move this much into a trust? Yes. And name your granddaughter sole beneficiary? Yes. What about your children? I looked at him, dead in the eye. Let them inherit their silences. When I got home, I pulled the old photo albums out from the hall closet. Dusty, heavy. Albums that weighed more in memory than in paper. One by one, I started pulling photos from the pages, not ripping, just peeling gently. Julianne as a baby, Marcus on his first bike, birthdays, Christmas trees, vacations that always looked happier in hindsight. I made 2 stacks, one for each of them. Then I picked up a third pile, photos of me, alone, with friends, with my sister. On my first day at the bakery, at the protest march in '76, laughing with women whose names I'd nearly forgotten, the life before him, the life beyond him. Those went in a separate envelope, labeled mine. The next day, they arrived together, like kids summoned to the principal's office. Julianne crossed her arms. Marcus hovered near the door. I didn't offer tea. I'm changing the will, I said. They said nothing. I've set up a trust for your niece. Everything else, bank accounts, investments, personal items, are being redistributed. Legally. Immediately. You're cutting us off? Marcus asked, jaw tight. No, I'm cutting the cord. You've been living off it long enough. Julianne stepped forward. We're your children. And I was your mother, I said. Still am. But I'm done being your safety net, your excuse, your afterthought. Marcus's voice rose. This is about Dad. About the will, this is about me, I cut in. Finally. I handed them each a small folder. Inside, copies of their loans, sums they never repaid, amounts I never chased. Because I believed love was supposed to overlook things. Julianne looked down. I'm not asking for it back, I said. I'm just reminding you what love cost. They left an hour later. No hugs, no tears, just silence. But this time, it belonged to me. The house was quiet after they left. That new kind of quiet, not emptiness, but clarity. No footsteps, no slammed doors, no voices raised half in guilt, half in habit. Just me, my breath, and the soft ticking of the old clock above the stove. I made myself tea and drank it standing up. The folders still lay on the table, opened slightly where Julianne had tossed hers down. I didn't move them, let them sit like stones. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Elaine Bishop. We hadn't spoken since Leslie's funeral. Not because of any falling out. Just life. Just time. Just the slow erosion of things you think are permanent until they aren't. Elaine, I said when she picked up. You got an hour? Her voice lifted, surprised and warm. For you, always. She arrived with shortbread cookies and a scarf wrapped twice around her neck, even though it was warm. I told her everything. Not in one rush, not crying. Just piece by piece, like laying out laundry to dry. She listened the way only old friends know how to listen, without interrupting, without pity. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Well, she said, about damn time. I blinked. You always made excuses for them, she went on. Leslie, too. Remember when he missed your birthday dinner 3 years in a row? You still told people he was working late like some secretary in a 1950s film. I smiled, thin and brittle. Maybe I just didn't want to see. Or maybe, she said, you didn't think you deserved more. That sat in the room like a truth no one wanted to dust. I'm tired, I admitted. Elaine nodded. You're not done, though. No. You're finally starting. When she left, she hugged me tight and whispered, if you ever feel like burning it all down, I've got matches. That night, I wrote a letter to Sandra, not to thank her, not to confess, just to acknowledge her. Dear Sandra, we were lied to by the same man. I got the wedding. You got the will. I suppose neither of us really got him. That's not your fault, or mine. Thank you for walking away. It's more than he ever did. Martha. I didn't send it. I didn't even seal the envelope. But it sat on my desk like a weight lifted. The next morning, I called Nadine. I want to update the will today, I said. Add a few contingencies. Such as? If either of my children contest the trust, I said, they forfeit everything else. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, you've been thinking. No, I said. I've been remembering who I was before I was everyone else's insurance policy. By afternoon, the papers were signed, stamped, filed, done. That night, I sat on the porch in my oldest sweater, feet tucked under me like I used to do before everything got complicated. I watched the light change across the yard, how the shadows moved when no one was watching. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was still here. And that, I realized, was more than enough. They stopped calling after that. No more messages, no texts with forced questions about my health, no birthday reminders hastily forwarded from someone else's calendar. Just silence. But silence, I was learning, has a shape. And this one didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like air finally clearing after a long, sour storm. On Wednesday, I went into town for groceries. At the checkout, the clerk, young, sweet, a little too chatty, smiled and asked, "You having company tonight?" "No," I said. "Just me." She tilted her head. "That's still good." I nodded. "It is." On the way home, I passed by the old community center. The windows were taped with flyers, yoga classes, watercolor painting, grief groups. One caught my eye. Women's Writing Circle, every Thursday at 6 p.m. No experience needed. I stood there longer than I meant to. Then I tore off the bottom tab with the phone number and put it in my coat pocket. That night, I found the notebook Leslie once gave me for writing recipes. I'd only filled 2 pages. Both were for casseroles I never liked. I tore them out. The paper made a neat sound as it gave way. Then I opened to the first blank page and wrote at the top, things I never said. I didn't write much that night, just a few lines. I was 39 when I stopped sleeping on the left side of the bed because he liked the right. I was 47 when I started adding parsley to everything because he said it made meals look more alive. I was 61 when I realized he never once asked if I liked parsley. The next morning, I woke up to rain and a strange kind of energy. I swept the house, polished the wood trim, finally fixed the loose hinge on the back door myself instead of waiting for Marcus to get around to it. At noon, I made lunch for one and ate it without the television on. I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd eaten in silence. Not the kind that waits for something, but the kind that simply is. At 4, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the window, I saw her, Rebecca, my granddaughter. Her hair was wet, and she was holding a small tote bag. I opened the door. "Grandma," she said, "can I stay a few days?" I didn't ask why. I just stepped aside and let her in. She kicked off her sneakers and walked into the kitchen like she'd been doing it every day for years. Pulled 2 mugs from the cupboard just like that. I watched her quietly. "I didn't know where else to go," she said after a while. "Mom's furious with me. Says I'm taking sides." "Are you?" I asked. She looked up, eyes so much like her mother's but with something softer underneath. "I'm just not pretending anymore." We drank tea, not talking much. The clock ticked. The rain tapped softly against the window. When she finally went to bed, I sat at the table a while longer. Then I added one more line to my notebook. I'm 74 and just starting to learn the sound of my own voice. Rebecca stayed 4 nights. She didn't talk much the first 2, just helped around the house like it was second nature. Did the dishes without asking, folded the laundry I'd left in the dryer too long, watered the plants I always forgot. She didn't ask for anything, not even explanations. On the 3rd evening, we sat in the living room with the lights off, just the glow from the street lamp outside stretching across the rug. "Do you remember when you taught me to sew that stupid frog pillow?" she asked suddenly. I smiled. "It wasn't stupid, just lopsided. You said crooked stitches still hold if the thread's strong." "I did say that." She looked at her hands, turning them slowly. "I used to think that applied to people too, that even if something looked wrong, it could still work, still be a family." "It can," I said, "but not if only one person's doing all the stitching." She didn't reply right away. Then, quietly, "They're calling me ungrateful." "They would," I said. "Gratitude to them means silence." She nodded. "They said you manipulated me, that you're punishing them." That made me laugh, dry, tired, but real. "By surviving, apparently." Rebecca bit her lip. "I think they're scared, not about the money, about what it means that you finally said no." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm just done performing a role I didn't audition for." She leaned back on the couch, pulling her legs under her. "I don't want to turn into them." "You won't," I said. "You came here, didn't you?" Later that night, when she was asleep, I sat in the kitchen with the same notebook. I opened to a fresh page. Sometimes love isn't loud. It's the quiet click of the kettle at midnight, the extra spoon set on the table, the porch light left on just in case. The next morning, she packed her things. "I should go," she said. "I can't hide forever." "You're not hiding," I told her. "You're remembering who you are." She hugged me tightly, longer than usual. "Can I come again next weekend?" she asked. "Darling," I said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "This house will always be open for people who don't lie when they say they love me." When she left, I didn't cry. I made myself a second cup of coffee and stood by the window. I'd thought, all those years, that saying yes to everything was what made me a good mother. Turns out, it just made me invisible. But now they saw me, and they didn't know what to do with that. They called a meeting. That's what Julianne called it in her terse little text. "We'd like to talk, Marcus and I, about everything. Sunday at 3? Like we were business partners. Like this was a quarterly review. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit there, unread. Not out of spite, but because I was done responding on their terms. I waited until Sunday morning. Then I answered, "Fine, my house, not yours." At 2:56, they arrived together. Of course they did. Marcus in his fitted coat, that leather one he always wore to feel more in control. Julianne with her lips pressed tight, like she was holding in something acidic. I didn't offer tea. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd once read bedtime stories and built sheet forts and opened Christmas presents before dawn. Funny how places hold memories tighter than people do. Julianne spoke first. "We feel like you're acting out of anger." I looked at her. Not long, just enough. "And?" She blinked. "And we'd like to understand why. You've always been generous." "I was never generous," I cut in. "I was afraid. There's a difference." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Mom, we never asked you to cut us out." "No," I said. "You just let me fade, bit by bit, like old wallpaper." Julianne exhaled loudly. "This isn't fair." "You want fair?" I said. Fair would have been telling me about the will. Fair would have been not standing beside your father while he erased me in ink. You knew, Julianne. You watched. Her face tightened, but she didn't deny it. I was trying to protect you, she muttered. No, I said calmly. You were trying to protect the illusion. Marcus finally spoke. We figured Sandra wouldn't actually take anything. We assumed. You assumed wrong, I said. And even if she hadn't, the fact that you both knew and kept me in the dark, that's not a miscalculation. That's betrayal. They didn't answer. I stood, walked to the sideboard, and pulled out 2 envelopes. These are yours, I said, placing them on the table. Julianne frowned. What is this? Photographs, I said. Of your childhoods. The ones I could part with? Marcus didn't move. Why are you giving these to us? Because I'm clearing space. Julianne picked up her envelope, turned it over. So that's it? We're just not family anymore? I looked her in the eye. You'll always be my children, but being my family? That takes more than blood. Marcus's jaw twitched. We made mistakes, but cutting us out. I didn't cut you out, I said. You stepped out. I'm just not holding the door open anymore. Julianne stood abruptly. I can't believe this. I shrugged. Believe it. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Rebecca's siding with you. No, I said softly. She's just not lying anymore. Marcus followed her out, silent. He didn't look back. When the door closed, I sat back down. My hands were steady. Later that evening, I opened the envelope I hadn't given away, the one marked mine. I spread the photos on the table. Me at 17 in my first waitressing apron. Me with my college friends before I dropped out to marry. Me in the hospital, holding Julianne, tears still drying on my cheeks. Me alone on a beach in 1989, barefoot, with a book in my lap, and the wind in my hair. I looked at those photos like they were stories I'd forgotten I wrote. Then I picked up my pen and added a page to the notebook. There are silences that punish, and silences that protect. I've lived long enough to know the difference. The house was still, but it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. Sandra sent the signed refusal by registered mail. Nadine called the same afternoon. It's official. You're the sole beneficiary again. The house is yours, legally, finally. I said thank you, but it came out flat. Like someone else's relief. After I hung up, I sat in the same kitchen chair I'd sat in the morning after his funeral. Same soft light through the window, same teacup, same ache between the ribs. The house was mine, but it had never really been his to take. That night, I opened the hall closet and took out the box we used to call important stuff. Old tax records, mortgage papers, warranty cards for appliances we no longer owned. I found the deed near the bottom, signed by both of us 39 years ago. Back when the lawn was patchy, the roof leaked, and we were stupid enough to think love was a plan you could write down. I placed the new deed beside it. Then I called the real estate agent. Her name was Stephanie, young, sharp, with a voice like someone used to speaking over noise. She reminded me of the women I used to envy and then, later, pity. I want to sell, I said. There was a pause. Oh, I thought, sorry, I assumed you'd inherited it? I did. Then I reclaimed it. Another pause. Then the professional mask clicked in. Great. What price range are we thinking? Whatever it's worth. Maybe a little less. I'm not sentimental. We set a meeting for the weekend. I hung up and stood in the living room, looking around. The furniture, the paint, the sag in the couch where he always sat. This had been my battlefield, my theater, my silence. It was time to go. The next morning, I started packing. not frantically. One drawer at a time, one room per day. I gave away the formal china, never used, always dusted, donated the linen napkins, set aside 3 boxes of books for Rebecca. On Friday, I opened the bottom drawer of his desk. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside, among tangled cords and spare batteries, was a photo. Not of us, of him and her, Sandra. They were on a beach, smiling. He looked younger than he was when I knew him last. Softer. It didn't hurt. Not in the way I expected. It felt accurate. Like proof of something I'd already accepted. I placed the photo in a small envelope and labeled it "Return to Sender," then tucked it with the deed. On Saturday morning, Stephanie came with a clipboard and kind eyes. "You really want to list this?" she asked, glancing around. "Yes." "Do you want to buy something else?" "No." She blinked. "Where will you go?" "I'll let you know when I figure it out." She smiled. "That sounds terrifying." I smiled back. "It sounds free." The listing went live that evening. By Monday morning, 3 offers. The house that once cost us $32,083 was now worth 8 times that. Funny, isn't it? All that history, all those years, and it comes down to square footage and school district. I didn't counter. I took the second offer, clean, no contingencies. A young couple, expecting twins. It felt right. 2 people at the beginning of a story I no longer needed to be part of. When the papers were signed, I walked through the house one last time, touched the windowsills, the chipped corner of the hallway mirror, the place where Rebecca once drew on the wall and I never bothered to paint over. Then I locked the door, slid the keys into a neat white envelope, and handed it to the courier. No tears, no ceremony, just the steady beat of a woman walking away from a version of herself that no longer fit. And outside, for the first time in years, the air smelled like it used to, clear, possible, mine. I moved into a small apartment on the top floor of an old building just outside town. 1 bedroom, no stairs, no yard to rake. The windows were large and drafty, the floors uneven. But the light, God, the light. It streamed in every morning across the kitchen table, spilling over the chipped counter and onto the quiet floor. It made even silence feel like company. I brought almost nothing with me. A kettle, 3 books, 1 chair, my mother's brooch, and the envelope of photographs marked mine. Stephanie had offered to help find something bigger. "You could afford something with more space," she said. "A garden, maybe." "I've had enough things to tend," I told her. She smiled, but I don't think she understood. The first night, I sat in the chair by the window with my legs tucked up and a blanket across my lap. The building creaked when the wind shifted. The radiator hissed. No voices. No demands. No footsteps above me or doors slamming below. I slept with the window cracked open, and for once, I didn't dream of anything I'd lost. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Postmarked 3 towns over. It was from Sandra. "Martha, I meant to leave things quiet between us, but there's one thing I wanted to say, and I didn't want to call. I didn't want to be another voice you had to brace against. He told me you were cold, controlling, unkind. I believed him. That's on me. But after meeting you, I saw the truth, and I'm sorry. For not asking sooner. For not doubting sooner. I hope you're at peace. I hope you find something new. You deserved better. We both did. Sandra." I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of the notebook, behind the pages filled with my truths. That same week, I went to the women's writing circle. 6 women, 1 folding table, a pot of terrible coffee. We sat in plastic chairs and took turns reading lines we were scared to say out loud. When it was my turn, I opened to a page I hadn't shared with anyone. He built the house. I filled it. He brought home the paycheck. I brought home the missing pieces. He smiled in photos. I stood beside him, holding up the corners of the picture. I'm not angry anymore. I just want the camera to face me, finally. There was silence when I finished. Not discomfort, not pity, just recognition. After the meeting, one of the women, a retired teacher named Lorna, touched my arm. "That line," she said, holding up the corners of the picture. "That's exactly how it feels." I nodded. Then maybe I got it right. When I got home, there was a message from Rebecca. "Apartment looks lovely, Grandma. Send me the address. I want to visit next weekend." I replied right away. "I'll put the kettle on." That night, I sat by the window again. Same blanket, same tea. But something was different. I wasn't rebuilding. I wasn't starting over. I was starting. For the first time. The first time Rebecca visited the apartment, she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just one slow, silent tear as she stood in the doorway, eyes sweeping the small space like she was measuring the absence of everything I'd left behind. "It's so quiet," she whispered. "It's mine," I said. She kicked off her shoes and walked straight to the window. "I can see the river," she said. "I didn't know you could see this far from here. Most people don't look." She turned and smiled. "This is good, Grandma. This feels like you." I made tea. Not because it was expected, but because it felt right. We sat at the little round table I'd found at a thrift store, 2 mugs between us, steam curling like something sacred. Rebecca reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I brought something." Inside were printouts, emails, messages, photos. She laid them out like evidence. "Mom and Uncle Marcus are trying to reverse the trust," she said. "They've been asking around. I heard them on the phone with a lawyer. They think they can prove emotional manipulation." I sipped my tea. "They won't get far," I said. Rebecca watched me, brows drawn. "Aren't you worried?" "No." She sat back, almost disappointed. "They're furious. They keep saying you're not acting like yourself." "I'm not," I said. She looked up sharply. "I'm acting like someone who finally figured out she was never really seen." Rebecca leaned in, voice low. "Do you want me to say something? Post something?" No, I said. "Don't defend me. Let them stand in the silence they made." We were quiet a long time after that. Then she asked, "Do you miss the house?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I miss what I thought it was, but not what it became." She nodded slowly. "I didn't know he changed the will. I swear." "I believe you. I would have told you. I know." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "I hate that they're trying to make me choose." "They already chose," I said. "They just didn't expect me to choose back." After she left, I sat by the window and opened my notebook. The pages were filling up now. No longer lists of grievances, but observations, fragments, small, sharp truths. The first time I made a home, it was for someone else. This time, I fold the towels how I like. I leave the dishes in the sink if I'm tired. I don't apologize to the furniture when I bump into it. No one is watching. And still, I stand up straight. That evening, Nadine called. "There's movement," she said. "They've contacted a lawyer. He's poking around, trying to request documentation." "Let them," I said. "You're sure?" "Yes. Let them come. Let them stand in front of a judge and explain why they believe they're owed something they never earned." She paused. I've seen a lot of these. Usually, the mother caves. I'm not most mothers. No, she said. You're not. After we hung up, I lit a single candle on the windowsill. Not for ritual, not for memory. Just because I liked the way the flame moved when the wind slipped through the cracks. The next morning, I took the deed and my bank statements and walked them to Nadine's office. I asked her to make certified copies, to tighten every screw, to add contingencies, penalties, timelines. When she was done, she handed me a folder. You're more protected than a locked vault. Good, I said. I have to ask, she added gently. What made you finally draw the line? I looked at her, surprised by the question. Then I answered without thinking. I realized the people I loved weren't afraid to hurt me. And just like that, the room fell quiet. Not a sad quiet, a knowing one. That afternoon, I stopped by the bookstore on 5th and bought a used copy of The Year of Magical Thinking. I read the first 3 pages standing by the door, then bought it without hesitation. On the walk home, I passed a bakery. There was a sign in the window. Help wanted, part-time, mornings. I walked in. Are you hiring? I asked the girl at the counter. Yes, she said brightly. Do you have experience? I smiled. I have more mornings than I know what to do with. I started at the bakery the following Tuesday. 3 mornings a week, just a few hours. Enough to be useful, not enough to be tired. I wore a pale pink apron and handled the register, took coffee orders, rang up scones and cinnamon rolls. It was the kind of place where people smiled with their whole face when you remembered their name. No one there knew me as Leslie's wife or Julianne's mother. I was just Martha, the woman with steady hands and a quiet way of making things feel easy. There was a joy in it, in small talk that didn't turn into obligation, in folding wax paper around a croissant like it was something delicate, in having some place to be that didn't feel like performance. I started sleeping better, not the medicated kind, the real kind, where your eyes close and your body believes you're safe. On my 2nd week, a woman came in who looked vaguely familiar. Soft scarf, strong perfume. She hesitated when she saw me. You're Martha Clark? I nodded, wary. I'm the neighbor from across the street, from your old house. She gave a nervous smile. We met a few times. We bought it. She meant the house. The house. Oh, I said. Congratulations. She looked at me, searching for something. I hope that's not strange. Not at all, I said, and meant it. I hope you make it yours. We've already painted the bedroom, she said quickly, like that would soften something. That dark blue was too heavy. It always was, I said. We spoke for a few minutes. Then she left with a loaf of bread and relief in her step. I didn't cry. I didn't feel a pull. The house was a chapter, and I had turned the page. That weekend, Rebecca came again. She brought new photos, black and white prints she'd taken in her photography class. One of a willow tree bent low over water. One of her father's office building at night, lit up and sharp. One of me from behind, in the bakery. You took this? I asked. I wanted to remember this version of you, she said. The one who doesn't disappear in a room. I looked at the photo. The outline of my back, apron strings tied neatly. Light in the window. The simple shape of someone who belonged to herself. I like her, I said. Me too. Later that night, she found my notebook. Not on purpose. It was sitting on the windowsill, pages weighed down with a teacup. Can I read it? I hesitated, then nodded. She read for an hour, curled up on the couch. When she finished, she looked up with tears she didn't wipe away. Grandma, she whispered. It's like all the women in our family are in here. even the ones who didn't speak. I took her hand. Then make sure the next ones do. The next morning, she left a note on the table. Don't give this strength away, not for comfort, not even for love. I folded it into the back of the notebook. That afternoon, Nadine called. They've officially filed a petition to contest the trust. I said nothing. I expected it, she added. But I also filed something last week, a clause you asked me to add. If they contest and lose, they forfeit all secondary claims. And if they win, they won't. Still, I said, prepare me for the worst. She paused. The worst, she said gently, already happened. You were erased. This is just the echo of that. I hung up the phone. Then I put on my coat and went for a walk along the river. The air was cold, the trees bare. But the path was mine. I'd never walked it before. And yet, every step felt like something I remembered. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. Rain was in the forecast, and by the time I arrived at the courthouse, the sky had already darkened like it was bracing itself for something. I wore a gray coat and simple shoes, no jewelry, no makeup, just the truth and a file folder held tightly in one hand. Nadine met me on the steps. You ready? I've been ready for years, I said. I just didn't know it. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No oak-paneled walls or echoing gavels, just bad lighting, muted carpet, and rows of chairs that creaked when people shifted. Julianne sat on one side, Marcus beside her. Their lawyer, young, smug, with too much gel in his hair, flipped through papers as if the case would win itself by speed alone. They didn't look at me. Good. I didn't bring Rebecca. She offered, but this wasn't her war. She had already chosen her side and stayed. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes and a tired voice, reviewed the file. She asked a few questions. Nadine answered cleanly, confidently. No dramatics, just facts. Then came the argument from the other side. She created an atmosphere of emotional retaliation, their lawyer said. This redistribution of assets, this exclusion, it's punitive, vindictive. Her son and daughter were raised to expect a share of the estate. She has deliberately altered their inheritance out of spite. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Clark, she said, do you have anything to add? I stood. No one promised me a home, I said. No one guaranteed me loyalty. I earned that trust with decades of care, of sacrifice, of silence. I didn't ask my children for repayment. I asked them not to lie to me. And they did. The room was still. I changed the trust because I had to protect what little of myself they hadn't already taken for granted. I don't owe them the comfort of pretending it didn't happen. The judge looked down at the paperwork again, then said softly, That's clear. 15 minutes later, it was over. Petition denied. Trust upheld. Nadine shook my hand outside the courtroom. They won't try again. I know, I said. Julianne brushed past me on the way out, her face tight, controlled, like she still believed she was the victim in a story she never bothered to read fully. Marcus didn't say a word. Back home, I made tea, poured it slow, watched the steam rise. Then I took a sheet of paper and wrote a new letter. Not to them, not even to Sandra. To me, dear Martha. You did not break the family. You broke the illusion. And in doing so, you gave birth to something stronger, something honest, something that might survive. You. I tucked it into the notebook. That evening, I went to the writing circle. Lorna saved me a seat. The topic was turning points. I read my letter aloud. No one clapped. No one had to. We just sat there, surrounded by the soft sound of breathing, of heads nodding, of truth settling gently into a room that had already made space for it. Later, walking home under a sky that hadn't rained after all, I passed a small antique store. In the window, a single lamp with a cracked glass shade, still lit. And I thought, some things shine brighter once they've been broken. I didn't speak to Julianne or Marcus after the hearing, not because I was punishing them, but because there was finally nothing left to say. They sent no letters, made no calls. There was no apology, no admission, just silence. The kind that no longer bruises, the kind that confirms. Some losses you mourn, others you release like breath you've been holding too long. Life after the courtroom settled into something gentle. I still worked at the bakery, still made tea in the quiet, still wrote in the notebook, though less now, not because I had run out of things to say, but because I was learning to say them with how I lived. I'd wake early and walk the river path, the same stretch of pavement that had become my tether to the present. Old women passed me sometimes, nodding like we belonged to a secret club, the ones who stayed, who endured, who finally said no. Rebecca came often. She helped me rearrange the apartment, brought new prints for the walls, black and white shots of things you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. A bent spoon in a dish rack, a girl's shadow against concrete, rain sliding down glass. One afternoon, she asked if I'd help her with a school project, a photo essay titled "What Strength Looks Like." "Will you let me take your portrait?" she asked. "Only if I don't have to smile." "You don't," she said. "You just have to be." So I sat in my chair by the window. She didn't pose me, didn't ask me to fix my hair. Just lifted the camera and waited until the moment was honest. When she lowered it, I asked, "Did you get what you needed?" She smiled. "More than that." The essay was displayed at a gallery downtown. Nothing grand, just a narrow room above a coffee shop. Students stood nervously beside their work, pointing things out to strangers, pretending they weren't listening to the compliments. Rebecca's photo of me hung alone on a white wall. Beneath it, her caption, "She is not smiling," because strength isn't always sweet. Sometimes it's quiet, and sometimes it leaves the room when you stop noticing. But when it returns, it does not ask your permission. A few people read it out loud. One woman whispered, "God, that's my mother." I stood in the back, arms crossed lightly, not needing to be known. Just seeing it, being it, was enough. When we got home, Rebecca poured us both a glass of wine. Not tea this time. "To turning the page," she said, raising her glass. "To not going back," I replied. Later, alone, I lit the candle again. The same one from the windowsill, burned short now, but still willing. I opened the notebook and turned to the very first page. Reread the first line. Things I never said. Then I turned to the last page and wrote, "I said them, and I'm still here." The letter arrived on a Tuesday. No return address. Just my name, written in Marcus's angular handwriting. The envelope was thick, too thick for an apology, too formal for love. I didn't open it right away, just set it on the table beside my tea and watched the steam curl like it was reading it first. I waited until evening, when the light softened and the apartment grew quiet in that gentle way it always did after 5. Then I opened it. There were 6 pages. Typed. Careful. Cold. He used words like regret and unfortunate and if you feel hurt. He said, "We reacted poorly," and "We wish things had gone differently." Nowhere did he say, "I'm sorry." Not once did he write, "I knew it was wrong." He asked if I would consider re-establishing communication. Not because he missed me, not because he'd reflected, but because, in his words, Family deserves a chance to repair. I folded the letter neatly, then tore it down the middle, then again, then once more. Not out of anger, out of clarity. He hadn't written to me. He'd written to his own conscience, and that wasn't my job anymore. Later that night, I told Rebecca. She nodded. That's all he knows how to do. Apologize to a mirror. Maybe, I said, but I'm not standing behind it anymore. She looked at me quietly, then said, Do you think they'll ever see it? No, I said, and I've made peace with that. The next morning, I baked a cake. A real one, scratch recipe, 3 layers, lemon curd between them, thick frosting. I didn't bother to smooth perfectly. The kind of cake you bake when you're not trying to impress anyone, just yourself. I brought it to the writing circle that evening. Is it someone's birthday? Lorna asked. Yes, I said. Mine. They all looked at me, surprised. I mean, I added, not the day I was born, the day I stopped asking permission to be born again. We laughed. We ate cake. We wrote a little, shared less. Some days the words flow like water, other days they cling to your fingers like oil. But the showing up, that part never fails. That weekend, I sold the last thing that tied me to the old life, my husband's watch. A gold one I'd kept in a drawer for years. He'd worn it every day, right until the day he didn't come home. I brought it to the jeweler who always remembered me. You sure? He asked. I am. He appraised it, handed me cash, and said, Most women keep these. I kept enough, I said. With the money, I bought a plane ticket. One way. To a place I'd always wanted to see, Lisbon. I didn't tell anyone right away, not even Rebecca. Not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted it to live in my chest for a few days, like a secret light warming the edges of everything. When I finally told her, she cried. Can I visit? She asked. Of course, I said, but I won't wait to go. She hugged me hard, not like a goodbye, like a go. The apartment lease was short. The bakery understood. The women at the circle gave me a notebook bound in red linen with the words, No permission needed, embossed on the cover. I packed light, a coat, 2 dresses, 1 pair of shoes that could walk on cobblestones without complaint, and the envelope marked mine. On the morning I left, I stood by the window one last time, looked out at the river, the trees, the sidewalk below, the bench where I'd once watched a mother tie her child's shoe, the street lamp that flickered even in daylight, the bakery awning in the distance, just visible past the rooftops. I didn't say goodbye. Just, thank you. At the airport, I sat alone with a cup of tea and a sense of something I couldn't quite name. Not joy, not pride. Something deeper, like breath after being underwater too long. When they called my boarding group, I stood up without hesitation. No one was waiting for me at the other end. No plans. No baggage but the kind I chose. Just a city I didn't owe anything to. A language I didn't yet know how to misunderstand. A place where I could wake up each day and be no one. And from there, anyone. On the plane, I opened the red notebook. Wrote only 1 line on the first page. This is not a story about what I lost. This is a story about what I took back. Then I looked out the window and let go. If this story found you at the right moment, if you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or forgotten, share it. Pass it on to someone who needs to hear. It's never too late to be fully seen.